upon the knowledge of a journey and of an aspiration to create change around a very critical subject. The background to this has to do with what I would call colonial destruction. I didn't come into this study or this work without a bias. I do believe that as African people, something very terrible happened to us through the many layers of colonial invasion, enslavement, and suffocation. And this destruction impacted on the family, it impacted on the man. And when I speak about the African man, it's not because the African man is more important than the woman, but because some of us also need to give that voice. So this is an attempt not to compete with, but to be in very close relation to the African woman, because we share the struggle and we must also share the fight and the victory. This is also about the pain African men carry and reproduce. It's about the lack of role modelship that many African men long for, and the problematic aspects of initiation. I will share a little bit about this as I go. I feel there's certain things we need to revive and bring back in a different way. I want to share a little bit of respect to the many sisters and brothers that have walked this journey with me and that I've been allowed to learn from, that I've been able to see and operate with. I want to start with the supervisor for my study, Professor Catherine Odora Hoppers. I'm part of the student cohort at the South African Research Chair of Development Education, and she has allowed me to be stubborn, to ask questions that others may feel are uncomfortable, to live my study and not force me to make it only an academic pursuit. And there's many, I cannot take the time to mention their names now, but there's many who have been part of and are continuing to be part of this journey. So why do I choose to write about this or work with this subject? One motivation is that I think it's very important that we now rethink African masculinity. I think we know a lot about what it's not supposed to be. We are quick and maybe becoming better at calling it out when we see the examples we don't want. But we seem to almost define the masculinity we want in the negative. It should not be violent. So it should be what? I want us to rethink. I want us to seek an understanding. What kind of men does Africa need right now? And I also want us to allow an emergence of epistemic tools for relevant and meaningful African manhood. So what does this mean? This means to look at the effects of colonialism and coloniality on African masculinities. I believe we are very different men, not only because of, but for a very primary reason located in colonialism. And there's a need for culturally grounded decolonization and transformation of African masculinities. How have I gone about learning more and understanding this better? By creatively engaging knowledge and a new reflection in a process that will produce usable solutions for particularly young African men. So I draw a lot from my practice. I've been working with men in different capacities for the last 15 years. In addition to that, I've used literature, I've used research in terms of interviews, interpretation, and testing out. So the research question that I have put in my study goes like this. How has coloniality impacted on African masculinities? And what role can African culture play in shaping a philosophy of education for relevant African masculinities? But this is not necessarily the question that men have in their head. The question I hear many men ask is, what does it mean to be an African man? And when I listen to that question, I think I stress the word mean. What is the meaningfulness of being a man? And how do I become one? I have applied a number of lenses to look at this from. One is transdisciplinarity, which I see as a way of crossing disciplinary borders or boundaries and a wholesome approach. For me, a very fundamental aspect is also black consciousness. And I think we are familiar with how Biko taught us to think about black consciousness as a way to rally around the cause of oppression, our skin color, and operate as a group to rid ourselves of the shackles that have bound us to perpetual servitude. We can stop to talk about this when this oppression no longer exists. As long as it does, we will talk about it, we will insist on it, and we will work on it, unapologetically. Culture is also very important for me, and I'm very disloyal to the borders of this continent. I don't have so much need for a South Africanness or a Kenyanness or a Ghana-ness. I think we are doing ourselves a great injustice by being so loyal to the borders that only those who want to oppress us really benefit from. These borders are not there for us, yet we follow them. And I want us to draw from and reclaim indigenous knowledges and practices. I also would like to phrase this as Africology, which is a subject that has been developing over some time, which I see as holistic practice of African logic and coherence. And this is the overview of my study. I'm just doing the basics of my academic pursuit to demonstrate that I have some academic intelligence, but this is not really what I want to share with you. This is just the introduction. So you can see that for yourself, it's a long process. I chose participatory action research. I don't know if anybody in the house have applied that as your methodology, but if you have, you know you need to be extremely patient. It takes a long time, and next to other students who maybe chose other ways of researching, you'll find yourself spending longer time, being more frustrated, having to go deeper. I chose it because I think it is one of the least oppressive research methodologies. It gives people a voice continuously, and as a researcher, I take a step back. I am not the knowledge holder, I am the listener. So I went to Venda to do my empirical research. Why did I choose to go to Venda? So in my life in South Africa, I've been to many parts of the country, I've interacted with many communities, but I realized that Venda is one part of the country that I didn't know very well. And I kept hearing about how cultural Venda people are, how strongly African identity is expressed there, and also how much within the Venda culture people know the history, they know where they come from, maybe more than many other communities in the country. And I was curious to find that out, and also to engage with the community where I had no prior experience, and who also had not been exposed to the work that I'm involved in. I then engaged with many young Venda men and some women as well in deep thought and deep dialogue. And I have found this to be extremely important, that as African people we need to talk, but talk for a reason, and talk to actually slam and break some of the barriers that have stopped us to talk from deep within. I engaged in interviews where I asked about this understanding of African men's role, African men's experience, and how history and culture can play a role in us healing and decolonizing ourselves back to a meaningful role. I also spent a lot of time observing. I spent a lot of time in contexts where I could not necessarily say much. And I think that's only right as a researcher. You need to take a step back. Because when you come as a researcher, whether you want it or not, certain powers are being invested on you. Oh, as a researcher, no, this one is very knowledgeable. This person comes all the way from UNISA. This person is based in Joburg. All of those things kind of creates a static in the room. And I spent a lot of time at the back of the room, listening, dealing with other young men who then were at the front of the room, being the voices, and very often in Chivenda, a language that I'm not conversant in. And through this, I was witnessing and seeing emergence. I was seeing becoming. I was seeing men coming to life through being allowed and being given a platform to tell their stories. We also created an intervention which is called Mutangano wa Bwana, Meeting for Men, and we decided based on the conversations we had with men to call this Black Man Know Yourself, Don't Forget Your Past, borrowed from Femi Kuti's song. We are also now developing an action tool. I wanted to deliver more than just a thesis. It was very important for me that the work that I do in this PhD also is meaningful to a young African man. And most young African men and women do not read theses. And I completely understand why. Theses are normally very boring. So to create a tool that can be more interactive, we are now working with a number of South African DJs and producers to produce a mixtape where we will use deep house and jazzy and African-inspired house music as a basis to teach certain lessons. And we have come up with a toolbox which I will return to. Just to say a little bit about the findings that we have come to, I'll just share 4. One is indigenous practices of manhood are broad and complex and navigate many paradoxes meaningfully, meaning that within the westernized understanding of gender, it is it's very narrow, and the few steps or the few lines you can actually, the few platforms that you can exercise your masculinity on normally has to do with possession, has to do with power, has to do with brutalizing something. So you earn more than other people, so that makes you powerful. You are a strong, bullyish man, and that makes people afraid of you, and that gives you a certain notion of masculinity. Even those who don't like that type of masculinity often give the man that role. I think African indigenous practices gives us a whole different universe to draw from, and we need to return to that. A second finding, African manhood is built from a sense of duty in response to communal needs, shaped by consciousness, character, and endurance. I meet many young African men who do not think they are needed, who do not think they have any value in this world, who don't feel they belong anywhere. And this speaks to that we also as a nation, as we struggle with our colonial wound, have allowed to lose many young men that we need to remind of their importance. A third finding, the self of the boy must die for the man to be born. This is what initiation is supposed to do for us. The boy, because the boy is by nature clingy, needy, want, defiance. I want that! And when the boy doesn't get that, the boy will cry, and the boy will make a whole lot of havoc because he doesn't get what he feels he wants. Some of us never get beyond boyhood, but we are supposed to. And that means that the boy needs to actually be put to rest. A fourth sharing from this study, responsible manhood is a result of an educational process. And if that is true, it also means that the practices of masculinities reflect the degree to which society is teaching manhood. What I'm trying to say, collectively, if we have gotten to a stage where many men are producing behaviors that we don't like, there's also, and I'm not trying to shift blame away from the individuality, but there's also collective ownership. We need to say, what do we want to teach African men? How are we engaging African men to be very specific about the role that they need to do to serve our families, our communities, and our nation? I will then go quickly to share the 9 themes that came out, and this is generated through a long coding process of listening to many African men and women talk about the role of African men. So this is, what can I say, a modern addition to an initiation process. So I've come up with a toolbox for African manhood, and this is what it's supposed to do. We need to engage African young men in deep self-reflection, critical thinking, spiritual processing, mentor relations, experiential learning, communal practices, and cultural grounding. And I think we have not seen that our governments can be trusted with this task. So this has to come from our communities. We cannot wait. We cannot only rely on policy for this. It really is up to us. The need, quoting Buntu again, the black man has become a shell, a shadow of a man, completely defeated, drowning in his own misery, a slave, an ox bearing the yoke of oppression with sheepish timidity. And these are 9 tools, and I'll go through them quickly because there's no time to dwell on each and every one. One is vision. You need to be able to see a world that you're supposed to make meaning within as an African man. Number 2, mind. Your mind is critically important, but what is inside it? I find many men, when we engage on important questions about life, saying, I never thought about that. I never thought that was okay to think like that. Men are often not encouraged to and may not even think it's okay to think a lot. We even have sayings in some of our communities, if you think too much or if you read too much, you'll go crazy. 3, self. Many African men do not want to be the self that we experience ourselves as. Many of us spend a lot of time on being ashamed of ourselves, putting ourselves down, thinking we are not good enough, clever enough, important enough. And because we know that that does not give you any access to masculinity, we need to force people to be in our presence. We need to shout people into liking us. We need to dominate. Number 4, will. Will is maybe the most important psychological drive that we can empower. If you will your responsibility, if you will your respect, it's not a test, it's not an experiment, it's nothing that you're going to try to see if it works. It is something you do. 5, spirit. The focus here is not on ritual itself, but for the African man to open up something in his heart and spirit that has been locked away so long that he can barely remember the source. 6, relations. We struggle with relations. We need to relearn how to relate. First with ourselves, with our sisters, with our children, with our community. 7, family. We struggle inside family as well. We're supposed to learn family. 8, sex and violence. It is sad that we have to put these 2 words in the same sentence, but I think you understand why. Sex relates very closely to violence in our experience. If you think of the philosophical understanding of Africa being raped and how that has also become a dominant experience on this continent. 9, land. And land here does not only mean a plot that you grow vegetables on. It also means ownership of space. It means that in your spirit, you are responsible for what is available to you and you honor what is there. This brings us to the first step. The first step, therefore, is to make the black man come to himself, to pump back life into his empty shell, to infuse him with pride and dignity, to remind him of his complicity in the crime of allowing himself to be misused and therefore letting evil reign supreme in the country of his birth. I'm coming to the closing. Meaningful manhood. I would now like to share something about the secrets inside of the And that's how we get to understand the secrets of the African man's mind. So if you have thoughts, if you want to ask a question, if you have something supportive to say, send an email to this address. Sure!
Buntu!